Morning, everybody. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk on this cold morning. Today, I'm going to be reacting to a video requested by Noble Knight House Hapatrix. It's called The Complete History of the Burning of Prospero Warhammer 40k and Horus Heresy Lore, made on the Oculus Imperia YouTube channel. If you guys want to check out the original video as well as Oculus Imperia's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you want to check out my reactions to other Warhammer 40k content created by YouTubers, as well as Oculus Imperia, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top right there. Yes, this was supposed to be done last week, but I didn't have enough time to do it last week, so I'm here now. So yes, hopefully you guys are not too angry with me. Yeah, this video is about 4 hours long. I don't think I've actually reacted to anything that's that long. So I've decided that I'm going to cut it into parts. I'm going to cut my reaction into parts, and I'm going to be posting them on a weekly basis. Today is the first part, and then next week it's going to be the next part. Because if I were to post the entire 4 hours, with me, I'm estimating it will be at least 7 hours of discussion. 7 hours of reaction and discussion to the video. So it'll be too long, and it'll take forever for me to upload the video onto YouTube. So this way it'll be bite-sized, it'll be controlled and managed, and it'll be faster to upload onto YouTube. So that's why I'm doing this. And yeah, hopefully you guys can understand that. Hopefully Noble Knight House Hapatrix, you can understand my reasoning for cutting it into parts. And yes, let us start with the complete history of the burning of Prospero. A jewel in the crown of the Imperium of Man. One of the greatest jewels. That was Prospero. Okay. I know how the story begins. I know how the story ends, but I don't know how we got to the ending of that story, or of the story, in terms of Prospero burning. Yeah. So in the between, that's where I'm not entirely sure. I know the current players in the story, Magnus the Red, the Primarch of the 6th Legion, I forgot his name right now, Leman Russ, you know, as well as Constantine Valdor was there as well. So yes, there were main players there during the burning of Prospero, and other people who probably Oculus Imperia is going to talk about. And yeah, let's see you know, if Oculus can further explain you know, what happened, how did it happen in terms of the burning. And yeah, it's going to be a sad affair, I think, because a lot of people died there. A lot. Okay, I'm digressing. Let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
It has been said by your most humble servant, within Chronicles not all may have security and piety clearances to parse, that our galaxy, our universe, is one enamored with stories. Spend long enough buried within forgotten archives, reading the accounts of ages almost as forgotten, and one cannot help but be drawn to the almost narrative quality of the defining events of epochs now dead. But then again, are we to be surprised at this, when the very arch-enemy of humanity, of reality itself, is a collection of howling, malignant, self-aware ideas that claw and scratch at the veil between worlds, hungry to get in? Stories have power, as do the players within them, though they may neither realize it nor comprehend the ends to which their decisions will lead them. The Primarchs, the gene breed of the Emperor of Mankind, have of course been outsized players upon the historical stage, beings of such incredible power that they have acted as dynamos for both progress and destruction. Much as
I would say that they are dynamos of destruction more than progress. Yes, you could say during the Great Crusade, they did contribute to progress of the Imperium of Man, but that is entirely eclipsed by the destruction during the Horus Heresy and the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, where the Imperium of Man has become stagnant for the next 10,000 years. So I would say the daimonism for destruction has eclipsed any type of progress, any type of work that they have tried to achieve while they were still, operating within the Imperium of Man. Many of them. Yeah.
been made about their inherent, deeply flawed humanity. And there are few tales that illustrate this more than the one your humble servant must now dedicate himself to recounting. Pride, as the maxim spoken in almost every human tongue will recount, cometh before the fall, and there were few beings as prideful as the Primarchs of this tale. Not even the greatest dramaturges of the past could concoct a story of such breathtakingly human disasters, colliding in painfully, irrevocably permanent catastrophe. Know then, that this is the prelude, the opening act of the great heresy, the stage setting for the greatest tragedy to ever befall humanity. The burning of Prospero. It is oft said that within hindsight lies the truths we were blind to, and it is certain that, with the long years since the passing of the Horus Heresy, that which we could not see is all too readily revealed in patterns once secluded. The War Master's rule over the Imperium at Arms was brief within the overall span of the Great Crusade, his tenure marked by victories aplenty, but also, should one be afforded a glimpse at the totality, quite curious happenings. Everything from bonds of kinship being forged with parties and factions disparate, to the stockpiling of arms and armaments in holdfasts unexpected, to the preferential treatment of commanders and expeditions surprising. All were taken, at the time, to simply be new leadership under a new leader. Horus, for all being the favored son of the Emperor of Mankind, was not his progenitor, and had a style of command that was quite different from that of the Lord of Lightning. Not only this, but it is verifiable by accounts of sundry biographers of the Primarch, including Petronella Vivar's unpublished work and the treatises of Loic Gerentius.
Oh wow, Petronella Vivar's work survived? I thought it died with her, the moment Horus snapped her neck. But it's good to hear that some of her work survived and it can be, used in this video, if I can say that, by Oculus Imperia. So yeah, it's good to hear that Petronella Vivar's work survived. That poor lady.
Collected in the seminal Lamentations upon the Age of Darkness, that Horus felt a certain need to prove himself to both his father and his brothers following his ascension to this newest and most important of offices. It is not difficult to surmise that the War Master could have made decisions explicitly because they were different from how the Emperor would have made them. Speculation has long gone back and forth amongst historians regarding the point as to which these decisions shifted from innocence to knowing willful treachery, and one is inclined to state that such a date is impossible to discern. The malign power...
I would say that his decisions turned from innocence to treachery, willful treachery, the moment he began negotiating with the Interrex Empire. Abaddon, in the Monville Council, was totally against any notion of negotiating with the Interrex Empire because the Interrex Empire had xeno species in their empire. They had xenospecies in their empire, and that was against the Great Crusade. That was against, being compliant with the Imperium of Man. And Horus Lupercal knew that, but he wanted to take a different path from what the Emperor expects from his Primarchs and the Astartes. He wanted to take a different path. Now, the Emperor's word is law. Whatever the Emperor says goes. Yes, Horus Lupercal is the War Master, but the Emperor is still the Emperor of mankind. He is still the head of state. And what Horus did there by trying to negotiate with the Interrex Empire, trying to take a different path that is completely contradictory to the Great Crusade, it is treachery. It is a form of betrayal. Now, some people might not think that it's a big enough concern to say, he's taken a different path from what is usually expected of the Great Crusade, and it's something that can be walked over. But the Emperor was quite clear. No negotiating with xenoraces, no giving them any sort of reprieve or peace. This galaxy will belong to humanity and humanity alone. And Horus wanted to negotiate with the Interrex Empire. That is betrayal. That is treachery. Yes, you could say what happened at the Serpent Lodge after that situation, then he totally, completely, had the mindset of someone who wanted to betray the Emperor and betray the Imperium of Man. But I would say it began here with the Interrex Empire. Yeah.
As it held sway over the War Master during his rebellion, work in mysterious and eldritch ways, and the degree to which they held influence over his decisions, or even the emotions driving those decisions, will ever be impossible to ascertain. Mayhap Horus's hand was being guided by them for far longer than we have believed, further back along his damnable path than even the Davin incident or the Interrex debacle. That hindsight one spoke of earlier allows us, now, to see these corrupted seeds for what they were. Preparation, planted far, far in advance of the War Master's ultimate rebellion. All such orders were issued under his lawful authority. Horus was, of course, supreme commander of the Imperium's armed forces, and though they ruled in the stead of the Emperor, the Council of Terra had no ability to gainsay anything that could be considered under martial jurisdiction, which is, of course, even if they had wanted to. While Horus and the Council had butted heads on the subject of the imperial tithe, relations between the two bodies were reasonably cordial despite being strained, with the civilians and the Sigillite knowing when to leave best alone when it came to the Primarchs. The independence and indeed unquestioned loyalty of Horus Lupercal allowed him to make decisions that none would question even if they had either the authority or the gumption to do so.
You see, this is a problem. You would expect that a genius like the Emperor of mankind to understand statecraft. You cannot have two centers of power in an empire, in a country, in any form of dominion. You can't have two centers of power. There should always be one center of power that governs and controls all the other departments within it, within the empire. And the civilian government should have the first and last say in anything that relates to the empire's growth, whether it's military or economic or socially. It should always be the High Lords of Terror who have the last word, not Horus Lupercal, the War Master. Because now there is no mechanism to bring Horus to account for any form of abnormalities within his portfolio, his responsibility as War Master of the Imperium of Man. No one can call him to account. There is no oversight by the civilian government on this military government. meaning Horus had it much more easier, to collect resources, collect military, equipment, and form his own private army that he would eventually use against the Imperium of Man. Now, if there was an oversight over the military aspects of the Imperium of Man, in terms of the High Lords of Terror, maybe it would have been far more difficult for Horus to initiate his rebellion against the Imperium of Man. Maybe it would have been far less of a serious problem for the Imperium of Man to contend with this civil war where Horus is leading, his Astartes and maybe a few Imperial Navy fleets with Imperial Guard regiments, but nowhere near the amount that he had during the Horus Heresy. If the civilian government had the first and last say in everything that affects the Imperium of Man, things would have been different. But the Emperor, in his great wisdom, believes that his son doesn't need anyone to check up on him. He believes that his son doesn't need to be questioned. And even everybody else within the Imperium of Man don't believe that they need to question the son of the Emperor of Mankind, that he is above reproach. And that is wrong. That is wrong. There should always be a body that is able to, question, that is able to bring the War Master to account for any form of situation or development, so that two centers of power doesn't lead to a bubble where there is so much accumulated power in one center, which is the military, and by the time it bursts, this bubble bursts, it will engulf the entire Imperium. And that's what happened. That's what happened. Because no one is looking over him. No one is watching where the money is going. No one is asking where are the military equipment and forces going. They just trust him because he's the Emperor's son.
He issued warrants of imperial immediacy to recently contacted knight households of dubious reliabilities. He diverted expeditionary fleets, altering the course of conquests and steering forces loyal to him into advantageous positions. He sent numerous imperial army regiments into theaters best suited for the legiones Astartes, ensuring several of the proudest forces of the Exertus Imperialis were humbled to the point of combat inefficacy. Perhaps most immediately and tellingly of all, but again, only so with hindsight, his final assignments given to Astartes' legions of his brothers saw that those that had the strength to oppose him were rendered isolated or in dire peril, most notably the 1st Legion Dark Angels, 9th Legion Blood Angels, and 13th Legion Ultramarines. In the prelude to her work, Principia Logisticae Exertus, optimization of supply, communication, and munition lines within static defenses, an analysis of the development of Imperial Palace logistical support systems prior to the Siege of Terra, Analyticae scholar Melanie Trath Presantium noted that the work of Lupercal during this particular period spoke to the profound genius of the Primarch as the architect of grand strategy. Such moves took into account what others would not, operating in broad strokes with full awareness that there was no particular linchpin to anything here, merely a collecting of power, an optimization of dispositions, a secret but forceful push to have the most upper of hands once his time would arrive.
But you see, if there was an oversight over the War Master and his responsibilities as War Master, maybe things would not be as easy as it was for him. He wouldn't have been able to accumulate so much power so fast without any, question of where is this all going. If there was an institution that was able to have oversight over the War Master's portfolio as the military arm of the Imperium of Man, maybe things would have been different. Maybe.
There was no honor in this, of course, but such is the true face of warfare. Stacking the deck in one's favor, so to speak, is a brilliantly expedient option. It was, of course, not by the sole hand of Horus Lupercal that the destruction of Prospero was wrought. One opens this chronicle with his involvement merely to grant to one's acolytes the context of what was happening in the background across the Imperium as the dread events of the burning were unfolding. The world's death was not the War Master's doing in any true sense, merely an event he saw opportunity in and would reap great benefits from. Though naturally Horus bears plenty of it, the blame is impossible to apportion accurately, as many scholars consistently debate whose sins ring louder than whose, inspiring many a tedious treatise as to who did what wrong.
I think a lot of the blame has to be put on the feet of the 15th Legion and their Primarch Magnus the Red, because they went against the Edict of Nicaea. And Magnus has also, destroyed the Webway project that the Emperor was, making for humanity. He went to Terra. He destroyed the wards that were protecting Terra from the warp and, other forms of technology that was accumulated to create the Webway project. He destroyed it all by using his Psyker, astral projection from Prospero all the way to Terra, which is against the Edict of Nicaea. So I would say the majority of the responsibility is at the feet of the 15th Legion for supporting their Primarch and Magnus the Red for initiating this project for him to communicate with the Emperor using his astral projection. Yeah.
Suffice it to say, many are the guilty here, but it would of course be remiss of one to not place the lion's share upon the scions of Prospero themselves, the 15th Legion 1,000 Sons, who in the curious and hateful circumstances of the times found themselves both as initiators and ultimate victims of their own private Armageddon. The Sons of the Cyclops were a legion apart from their cousins, unique in many ways and having been so from their creation. They had not taken part in the Unification Wars, being held from frontline combat status by the Emperor himself for reasons unknown. Adding to this, the bequeathing of the legion with its moniker, the 1,000 Sons, rankled the other legions as a mark of favor unearned by Astartes who had neither bled nor died during the Unification Wars or the Solar Reclamation. The ill will borne towards the 15th only deepened as rumors of their arcane practices and willful battlefield use of Psychana emerged, something the Sons themselves did little to either justify, explain, or hide. While there were some within the 15th that sought to educate their cousins in other legions, engaging in exchanges or debates upon the practices of the occult, many more within the 15th wore their separation as a badge of honor, seeing the ignorance they were treated with as little more than confirmation of their superiority over regular Astartes.
Man, they really are the sons of Magnus the Red. They really are the sons of Magnus the Red, the Crimson King, as he's also called. Yeah.
They were, by their reckoning, enlightened scholars, crafted to be so by the hand of the Emperor, and the barbarians that bayed for their censure were merely obstacles on the road to a greater human future. For context, the fear with which the Imperium was riddled with was not precisely unjustified. The Age of Strife had been an epoch where occult phenomena of all sorts had run amok across the material plane, wreaking untold devastation and claiming uncountable lives. Sorcerer kings mad with the powers of the warp were plentiful and terrible in equal measure, their genocides and apocalypses surviving, if not in record, then within folk memory, a blight upon the history of mankind, however you cut it. The Psyker was of course not unknown to humanity before the terrible fall from grace millennia before the revelation of the Emperor. Psykers had begun to emerge upon human worlds during the Age of Technology, and it has been supposed by many, not least amongst those of whom have hidden knowledges of the Emperor's own supposed origins, that they have always been amongst us, merely in minuscule quantities until relatively recently.
And the powers of psychers in the human society also, maybe it wasn't as strong before, but now, during the age of technology, it is gradually accumulating, and there are far more powerful psychers than has ever been generations before. So yeah, maybe they've always been here, and well, because even the Emperor is a psyker and he's been here since the very beginning. So you could say that humanity over time grew this psyker abilities and psyker powers from generation to generation until now it's reached its zenith, and now more humans are becoming fully fledged psychers compared to the past. Yeah, I don't know.
The millennia of the first great human interstellar empires, however, they had been met with intense curiosity and study on many worlds, whereas upon others they met with only superstition and death. The long peace of the age of technology gave way to the carnage and slaughter of the machine wars, and with the warp in turmoil and its denizens more alive and hungry than they had been in eons, the sudden emergence of a glut of human psychers proved catastrophic beyond imagination. On millions of human worlds, psychers fell victims to their powers, creatures from a plane worse than all the hells of human fancy, pupating within their flesh and emerging in gory apotheosis to slaughter and maim. Whole worlds were consumed by these incursions, and elsewhere, where the tides of the Imperium merely corrupted instead of possessing, mad psyker despots rampaged throughout the fires of their once great civilizations, ruling, ruining, ravaging. This era would last for 5,000 years, an age of death and destruction never before seen, and above all, the spectre of the insane human psyker, crackling with barely contained eldritch energies, eyes alight with unstoppable malignancy. The emergence of the Imperium as a regime came in tandem with the outright refutation of the uncontrolled and unrestricted use of psychers that had defined the Age of Strife. The worst of the foes of the early Unity regime upon Terra had been sorcerer warlords mad with unchecked mutations or in possession of arcane and corruptive lore from the deepest reaches of history. While the Emperor himself was indeed a psyker, his strength in that art, and his willpower besides, were so inordinately separated from the human scale as to render him seemingly immune from the corruption those weaker of his kind perennially faced. When the Imperium had been formally founded, bodies within it had been also formally incepted, specifically to account for and deal with the psyker. The Divisio Telepathica's existence was not merely born of the necessity for efficient interstellar communication in the form of astro-telepathy, no, but to regulate the entire sum of humanity's psychic human resources. Psychers, rendered unto the Divisia, found their lives committed to draconian study and training, brutally hammering their abilities into forms useful to the Imperium, and, moreover, limiting and controlling them. The distrust of the Imperium for the psyker is one born of millennia of pain and trauma, yes, but additionally one of utmost necessity.
I just wish they could have learned from Prospero, because Prospero, I would say it's like the epicenter while it was still, existing in the Imperium of Man. I think it was like one of the few epicenters of warpcraft institutions, where people go to get taught how to use their abilities, how to master their abilities, how to know what is dangerous, what is not, how to create more literature based on warpcraft and further study, further research. Prospero was that planet. I just wish that the Emperor could have, took the institutions from Prospero and copy and paste throughout the entire Imperium of Man, so that psychers are not only just used for weapons, as weapons of war, or as modems for communication, or to be used in the Navigators Guild in some form or fashion. I'm sure there are many other applications that can be used or that can be trained by people who have psychic abilities, Because Prospero, really, I think it was one of the best examples of innovation through technology and understanding warpcraft and merging those two, facets together to make something new, to make a society that coexists with its psychic powers as well as its technological innovation. It was the perfect example of what the Imperium of Man could have been. But the Emperor had other plans. Oh well.
Humanity had not changed by the hand of the Age of Strife, only been traumatized by it. The human genome was not fundamentally different in M30 than it had been in M25, so the control of psychers was placed at the apex of Imperial doctrine. The astropaths, the navigators, even battle psychers, they were all grim necessities of the Imperium and its Great Crusade. Resources wielded, yes, but rigidly controlled and structured, bound by the strongest and most inviolate decrees of the Lex Imperialis. Then, of course, there were the Legiones Astartes, the Librarius, and the Council of Nicaea. One has elaborated upon Nicaea at length in a previous record, which, if you have not parsed it, I would encourage you to cease playback of this particular chronicle and append it for later consumption only after you have concluded studies upon that earlier work.
Yes, I've reacted to that video. If you guys want to check out my reaction to the video that Oculus Imperia is talking about, centered around the Edict of Nicaea, the card is going to be at the top here. You'll just find it there. So yes, I've watched it last year, I think. Yeah, it's been some time, but I remember most of it. Okay.
In brief, the council was a conclave gathered by the emperor himself, consisting of the great and good and the influential of the Imperium, to resolve what had become known as the Psyker question. The Imperium, and most particularly the Legiones Astartes, could no longer operate within uncertain policy.
It was not about anyone else but the Primarchs, I should say. It's the Primarchs who instigated this, decision on the Psyker problem. Because it's never been a problem. If it was a problem, the Emperor would have dealt with this from the get-go. The moment he created the Thousand Sons Legion, he probably by then should have told them, don't use your powers. But he didn't. He allowed them to use their powers, and other legions as well who have psychers in their legion, they were allowed to use their powers until Primarchs like Mortarion came into the picture, demanding there should be certainty over the psyker problem within the Legiones Astartes. So it was never an issue. It was never an issue. Everything was going fine for the most part.
For the entirety of the Great Crusade, the Astartes and their Primarchs had enjoyed independence of jurisdiction over their own internal affairs, but to have such a stark contrast between them and the remainder of the Imperium, over the issue of psychers in particular, was appearing to be no longer tenable. Some legions, foremost amongst them the 14th Legion Death Guard and their Primarch Mortarion, shunned psychers utterly, while others, not least the Thousand Sons, but also the Blood Angels and 5th Legion White Scars, were openly calling for regulation, training, and acceptance of battle psychers amongst the Astartes.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that option. Let them go to institutions where they can be trained, where they can hone their skills, where they can apply their skills in a far more responsible manner, instead of blocking them out and making it or imagining that they don't exist. When they do exist, they're right in front of you. They are psychers. Sometimes it's just going to happen by mistake, where their powers just start to manifest, and it causes havoc. So it's better that we know that they're here and that they're able to master their abilities and use them responsibly, effectively, instead of uncontrollable mistakes that will just cause even more distrust, more fear over psychers in the Legiones Astartes. Anyways, Mortarion got what he wanted in the end.
Others, such as 6th Legion Primarch Leman Russ and 1st Legion Primarch Lyon L. Johnson, called for the formal censure of the Thousand Sons specifically, while still being more than willing to employ psychers within their own legions,
Hypocrites.
exclusively by their own idiosyncratic patterns. The latter highlights a crucial aspect of the debates surrounding Nicaea. By virtue of their willful and blatant use of Psychana during the Crusade, the Thousand Sons and Magnus the Red had placed themselves firmly at the heart of the issue, and bound them inextricably to how their fellow legions, and Magnus's brothers, felt towards them on levels that went beyond professional and strategic, and fully into the realms of the personal. It is perhaps...
It's always personal with the Primarchs. It's never, based on logic or anything of the sort in terms of managing the Imperium of Man in a far more just and equitable way. It's always personal when it comes to the Primarchs. It's either they're jealous of each other, they hate each other, they're fighting for the attention of either the War Master or the Emperor of Mankind. It's never truly about the progression of the Imperium of Man. It's just personal vendettas, personal takes. They are emotional creatures. They are extremely emotional creatures, and that's what compromises them every single time. But in the Emperor's great wisdom, he wanted them to be like this.
That's why the question had been delayed for so long in the first place, why the Emperor, beloved by all, had demurred from addressing so fundamental an issue in the Imperium's utilization of a new front of human evolutionary biology. A trifecta of Primarchs, Magnus, Sanguinius, and Jagatai Khan, had developed a structure within which they adamantly stated Astartes psychers could receive the training they needed to properly utilize their extraordinary gifts for the future of the Great Crusade, which they called the Librarius. Much has been made of the testimony of Magnus, and the representatives of the Blood Angels and the White Scars. The Crimson King's speech I have included in the record previously mentioned, but suffice to say, he rose to counter the bellicose fear-mongering of his brother Mortarion with aplomb. Privately, we know from the journals of First Librarian Azek Ahriman of the 15th that Magnus raged at his treatment before the council. He had, admittedly naively, assumed that the conclave would be one meeting upon scholarly terms of true and good intent, whereas what he found was a coalition arrayed not against just psychers, but him specifically, a witch hunt of old, as he is noted to have said. The reactionary wing present at the council had powerful allies, and while Magnus counted on the support of his brothers Sanguinius and Fulgrim, present there to back him up, he was fighting against the deeply ingrained fear of an entire regime. Mortarion, meanwhile, could count on the support of Russ and Corvus Corax of the 19th Legion Raven Guard.
And Russ is also one of the biggest hypocrites. Mortarion and Russ. Mortarion, he's here screaming about psychers. They should not be allowed. They should be banned from using their abilities. And yet, he's the same person who started learning on warp theory, warpcraft, and summoning demons to assist him during the Horus Heresy. The biggest hypocrite. And another one, Leman Russ, coming here with his, what does he call them again? Walk priests? I forgot what he calls them. But yes, he has his own psychers in his legion. That he does, for some reason, he does not see that they are psychers. He calls them rune priests, yes. Like, how dense, how stupid do you have to be to act this way? You say that they should be banned, and yet you have them in your legion. Limenras, Mortarian.
As well as the tacit support of Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists, present less as a proponent against the use of psychers and more for the censure of Magnus alone. The Crimson King supporters amongst the Brotherhood, such as the Khan, Gilliman, Alfarius, Vulcan, Conrad Kurz, and Lorgar, simply could not be present due to the exigencies of the Great Crusade. The Cyclops of Prospero was penned in, fighting seemingly an uphill battle, but even had his brothers been present, it is unknown if the ultimate outcome could possibly have been changed. Ultimately, the judgment would come from only one being, no matter how many minds were swayed by either Death Lord or Crimson King, by those against or for. As supreme authority of the Council, and of course the Imperium, the decision rested at the hand of the Emperor himself. Historians have debated the ruling throughout the ages, even some so far as decrying the Emperor for his judgment, given the events that would ultimately unfold directly because of it. Others support it entirely, given that, by their own reckoning, what followed was entirely the fault of others. All throughout this weaves the tricksome hand of hindsight. One cannot help but bind the burning of Prospero to the deliverance of the Emperor's writ upon that faithful day. Whatever debate surrounds this only serves to obscure what transpired, muddying the facts with wild conjecture and ideological positioning. Yes, it is the role of the historiator to interpret as much as it is to chronicle, but when dealing with such a monumentous event, there is temptation enough to moralize without the necessity of picking a side, weighing it down even further. The core truth is that, of course, the Emperor chose to ban the continued use of psychic powers by the Legiones Astartes, ordering the disbandment of all Librarius divisions currently operating within legions that had adopted them. Astartes with psychic talents or potential could return to their previously held ranks and roles, never again to use their powers, without any exception, under pain of such destruction that he shall rue the day he turned from my light.
As you know, the Emperor set up the 15th Legion for failure. He set up his son, Magnus the Red, up for failure, because the warp or their psychic abilities is a part of them, more so than any other legion in the Imperium of Man. Their entire planet, their culture on their planet of Prospero, their culture, even their religion, if they should have one, I'm not entirely sure, but the very essence of their people is connected, is intrinsically linked with the warp and with people with psychic abilities. You know, they breathe in and out the warp more than any other legion. So now you're asking them to stop breathing. You're asking them to stop being who you are and be like everybody else. It's just not possible. You're setting them up for failure. And essentially that's what has happened when Magnus wanted to reach all the way to Terra with his psychic abilities. Because it's so easy for them just to fall into that trap. They can't prevent themselves from not using their powers. It's just not possible.
The ruling was unequivocal, delivered with the force of a hammer from heaven, sundering the future of psychers within the Astartes legions by an imperial decree that brooked simply no subtlety. The 1,000 Sons left the world humbled as few other legions had ever been, returning to the Great Crusade with a numb resignation to the new world they had now to inhabit. All save Magnus, who retreated to Prospero, consigning himself to seclusion and study in his personal librarium upon works known to none, not even his closest sons. The 1,000 Sons would go on to spend 3 years prosecuting the Great Crusade as of old, with bolter and blade, or at least would do so publicly. While they were perennially careful in what campaigns they would engage in and with whom, and added a commendable number of worlds and victories to the imperial fold, rumors yet persisted as to their continued use of their powers. None of these were ever confirmed, naturally, and many within the Imperium saw the resurgent 15th Legion as a sign that the Emperor's edict was bearing commendably changed fruit for the good.
I don't want to entertain rumors. If there's evidence, then we can start discussing about it. But if it's rumors, I don't have time to waste on rumors. So, for now, I believe that after the Edict of Nicaea, the 15th Legion complied with the orders of the Emperor. They complied with them until Magnus, told them that we're going to try and communicate with the Emperor, and we need to use our powers. Until then. So, before that, they were compliant. I want to believe that.
Good of all humanity. But there were others who insisted that the Legion had never truthfully abandoned the use of their powers, that their employment was utilized at every opportunity, and when none of the suspicious eyes of others within the Imperium were upon them. The true case of this is, however, rendered moot, simply by what would happen next. It began with the shifting of troop movements across the fronts of the crusade that the Thousand Sons were stationed upon. Suddenly, and perfunctorily, 15th Legion forces quit the campaigns they were assigned to, the greater part of an entire legion stating merely that they were returning to muster upon Prospero at the behest of their master. The forces withdrawn appeared to include those commanded by the most senior captains of the legion, and of the divisions that were once possessed of a deep specialization in one form of arcana or another. Once upon Prospero, it was clear that whomsoever Magnus had summoned was required by the Primarch for what the most learned of the citizenry who kept records there presumed was some form of grand scheme within the deeps of the Legion's Prosperine templums. The picture of what happened subsequently is only possible to construct from sources both disparate and incomplete, many of whom are potentially even apocryphal, for it has been an event that has been loaded with so much conjecture, disinformation, and outright superstition as to have been muddied to the point of near insanity. Nevertheless, one will, of course, try. In one's previous record upon the Davin incident, where the War Master Horus fell to the corrupted blade of a sinister conspiracy, I elaborated upon how, according to sources, Magnus the Red appeared within the visions that befell Lupercal in his internment within the Serpent Temple. The Crimson King brought to his Primarch brother dire warnings of the path he was taking, and to where it would ultimately lead. But if these protestations had any impact upon Horus at all, history has proven them negligible. It is possible that this visitation of Magnus into the dreamscape of one of his brothers required the presence of senior Thousand Sons, for it was undoubtedly a product of supreme psychic power and control, possibly even beyond that of a mind such as Magnus's. That being said, the 15th Legion would undoubtedly aid their Primarch in what followed. History will record otherwise, but within the secret knowledges, those few archives untrammeled by the wrath of the siege, or the Inquisition, or the sheer relentless march of time, it is recorded that, despairing at what he saw as Horus's loss to the light of the Imperium, Magnus the Red sought to warn his father. Afeared of treachery everywhere, Magnus claimed he would be unable to trust standard means of astral communication with information of such terrible import. Whether this is true...
I don't know how far Prospero is from Terra, but maybe he could have just went there physically, get aboard a ship and warp away all the way to Terra, Maybe it will take a few months, but you'll get there and you'll be able to see him personally, physically. It would have been better than to defy the Edict of Nicaea. But you are a proud Primarch, Magnus the Red. You want to prove yourself worthy. You want to show to your father that, banning Psychers was a mistake. And your arrogance cost you. Big time. It cost us all big time.
True or not remains up for debate. Certainly astrotelepathy is an inexact medium at best, and certainly Magnus was not exactly incorrect in suspecting agents of treachery had their tendrils into the Imperium to a degree none yet knew, but it must be clearly understood that, for a character such as he, the option he was about to take represented more than expediency and safety. Magnus set about devising a grand ritual to reach his father, the Emperor, personally upon Terra. Such a work had quite literally never been accomplished or even attempted, nay, even dreamed, for the Imperial Palace lay behind psychic defenses unrivaled by any other location in the entire galaxy. Shielded from paranormal and immaterial attack by devices from the dark age of technology, and those wrought by the Emperor's own hand, it was functionally impregnable to any psyker alive.
And Magnus did not see that, maybe I shouldn't break down these wards, maybe I shouldn't break down these security measures, that they're up there for a reason. He didn't think about that. He didn't think that, okay, maybe I shouldn't touch what my father has created here because it's meant to protect Terra from any potential threats. That's really disappointing coming from Magnus. Someone who claims himself to be a genius, like the Emperor.
It would appear that, for his sins, Magnus took this as a challenge, wrapping the act of monstrous defiance with the bands of necessity, claiming to his senior officers to be doing so for the good of the Imperium, even while those, such as Ahriman, worried that this was being used merely as a means to demonstrate to his father the error of Nicaea.
Exactly. Isaac Ahriman, right? Yeah.
Surely, if Magnus's Psychana can deliver the future of the Imperium by warning the Emperor of Horus's perfidy, then the Emperor's thoughts upon it would be changed. The value of psychic power, untrammeled by regulation, would be proven without doubt. Magnus's true intentions upon the matter can only be speculated upon, just as we can only ever speculate on what was going on within the Emperor's mind when he banned his son's talents so publicly at Nicaea. All that remains is what happened. It is a matter of record that, in 004 M31, the Imperial Palace was recorded as having been the epicenter of a calamity unlike anything that had ever occurred planetside. Massive ground shocks and earthquakes spread out across the subcontinent from the Imperial Palace's heights in the Himalaya, wreaking devastation upon the hive cities and infrastructure across the Pan-Asiatic reaches. Power grids that fed the palace were completely overwhelmed, depriving hives continents away of power, plunging large parts of the throne world into absolute anarchy, and stretching the Imperialis Arbites to breaking point in vain efforts to maintain social order. The latter was likewise assailed by strange phenomena and manifestations congruent with aetherical incursions from the Immaterium, resulting in a massive and sudden upsurge of inexplicable and horrific violence. To those with the ken to see the pattern, what happened was clearly the result of a massive psychic event, of a force never seen on a scale that the throne world could possibly record, but noted within the deep annals of the Age of Strife by scholars long since dead of madness. The true damage, however, was wrought to the Emperor's own personal fief. His laboratories, the sprawling, deeply subterranean series of complexes under the Imperial Palace, collectively referred to as the Imperial Dungeon. By the records of none other than the 10,000, the vaunted Legio Custodes, Magnus the Red manifested upon Terra, before his father, at the epicenter of a work the Master of Mankind had been conducting in absolute secrecy since the end of the Ulanor campaign. His manifestation cost the Emperor, the Imperium, and the human species a prize beyond imagination. It is said in that moment, Magnus the Red recognized the totality of his ignorance and his hubris. What the Emperor said to his son, we will never know. The destruction...
Probably the Emperor didn't say anything. He probably just looked at him in shock and disappointment and anger. Yeah, I don't think the Emperor said anything. Maybe he just called out his name, Magnus. And that's it.
Action wrought by the psychic force unleashed by Magnus to maintain that one moment of incarnation had destroyed utterly technology of an epoch unremembered. Sundering work that had been conducted for centuries, if not millennia. The Imperial dungeon was almost ruined beyond repair by the actions of the Crimson King, while elsewhere on Terra, the estimated death toll caused by everything from psychic emanations to infrastructural failure would reach the hundreds of thousands. There was never an official statement upon the matter, not to the broader Imperium. The Arbites eventually restored civil order upon the throne world, yet the destruction wrought by the inexplicable attack would necessitate repairs so extensive they would ultimately be folded into Rogel Dorn's fortification of the Imperial Palace years later. Behind the palace walls, however, in the depths of the sanctum, censure had already been issued. It had taken mere hours. The Emperor, it would seem, had taken only the time required to ensure the worst of his son's collateral damage had been accounted for or mitigated before issuing a proclamation of formal censure for Magnus the Red, and by extension, the Thousand Sons. It was not the first time in Imperial history a Primarch had been censored. Magnus's brother Lorgar had suffered similarly from the transgressions against their Imperial father decades before in the ashes of Monarchia, but this case was altogether far more severe. Whereas Lorgar had been summoned and bade kneel, Magnus was to be brought, bodily, before the throne to answer for his actions.
By the word and the will of the Master of Mankind, Imperator Imperatoris Terra Regenam, it is hereby decreed that Magnus, Primarch of the 15th Legiones Astartes, be brought forth in censure and bound by law to stand before the throne imperial of Terra, there to answer for his actions and those of his gene-sons. To this end is Leman Russ, Primarch of the 6th Legiones Astartes, so charged upon the deliverance of his brother by any and all means he may,
and to account for his ignoring of the Emperor's own proclamation upon Nicaea. Lorgar was disappointed and disobeyed. Magnus's crimes were in orders of magnitude greater. Many even quietly wondered whether or not the 15th son would now suffer the same fate as the 2nd or the 11th, the forgotten and the purged. Certainly, this fear was not allayed by the naming of just who was tasked to bring the Crimson King to Terra. The Emperor appointed none other than Leman Russ, Primarch of the 6th Legion Space Wolves.
To this end is Leman Russ, Primarch of the 6th Legiones Astartes, so charged upon the deliverance of his brother by any and all means he may find needful, without limit in law, sanction, or imposition of attainder, unto the limitless void and the last day. So it is written, so it shall be.
Magnus's staunchest critic, the Imperial executioner himself, as the one bade to deliver the Cyclops before him.
But, I don't understand the Emperor's decision in ordering Leman Russ to go and capture, or should I say arrest, Magnus the Red. Or maybe the Emperor doesn't know that Leman Russ hates Magnus the Red. He hates him. He hates his legion. Why would the Emperor send someone who is emotionally compromised, like Leman Russ, to go and arrest Magnus the Red? Why didn't he send any other Primarch to do this job for him? Because Leman Russ, as been said before multiple times, is like an attack dog. He is the Emperor's executioner. Executioners are not people who arrest. Executioners are people who kill. So why did the Emperor decide that he's going to choose Leman Russ on this assignment? Why didn't he choose Primarch of the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, Rebute Gilliman, to go and censure Magnus the Red and the 15th Legion, like how the Ultramarines did with the Word Bearers and Logar? Sending someone who is cool and calm and collected, someone who would adhere to the request of the Emperor. Leman Russ is not that person. He acts on impulse. He is an emotional, bloodthirsty Primarch. I don't understand the Emperor's thought process in choosing Leman Russ. I really don't.
By any and all means necessary. The summons were dispatched through the astropathic choirs of Terra, be they in utter disarray, to Fenris, home of the 6th Legion, and the court of Horus Lupercal, for the War Master must, of course, be appraised of such a grave matter of imperial internal affairs.
Of course.
Much, of course, was made by the highest echelons of the Terran regime about the choice of the Vilca Fenrica for this assignment. The bellicose and isolated legion had a dark and blood-stained history, their unswerving loyalty considered not that of noble paragons of imperial virtue, but that of an attack dog, desperate to slip the leash and savage itself upon the foes of its master. This, too, was even before one considered the well-known enmity that existed between Russ and Magnus. The wolf...
That's why I'm asking, did the Emperor know about their relationship? Did he really know about his son's feelings towards Leman Russ and Leman Russ's feelings towards Magnus the Red? I don't think he really did. Or if he did, then why? Why send him on this assignment? Why do that?
King having been the Cyclops' most vocal critic for decades. The coming confrontation, with Russ granted the highest of approvals to bring his brother to task by seemingly any means he desired, would be one unlike any the Imperium had ever seen. The burning of Prospero, despite the verb that denotes it, was not one act. Few things are in the grand sweep of history, but this event is one so wrapped up in narratives, personalities, agendas, ideologies, and the sheer weight of time itself that it forms a mass that appears to pull in everything around it, bending the fabric of the past by its sheer influence alone. Threads weave into this tale from unexpected corners, with each new examination of what fragments of Chronicles past remain, new possibilities emerge. What one has compiled is one's own truest account of what occurred, but even then the dread weight of the past itself will inevitably reopen wounds of conjecture and supposition. For as with so much of the past, what was is clouded by ignorance, redaction, and vested interest. What you shall find in this tale's telling, dearest acolyte, is as much of the truth as can be managed, but as any good historitor knows, truth is a fickle beldam, coyly luring away the unworthy with promises and trapping them inside prisons of their own biases. Alas, one has not the time to lecture upon the means of ethical and legitimate scholarship of times gone by, but simply put, possess within yourselves an inquiring spirit and a mind open to doubt. Far from the maxims of the Inquisition, a mind too small for it is an ill thing indeed.
I'm sorry, I kind of got distracted with this image of this Thousand Suns Terminator, Armored Astartes being what's the word? Being impaled by this Sister of Silent with a great sword, just going right into him like that. Oh wow, that's crazy.
Contrary to the wild imaginations of some, the process for mustering the force that would bring the displeasure of the Master of Mankind to the planet of Magnus the Red was not a rapid affair, even with the superlative abilities of those who would lead it. Terra's astropathic communication networks had been thrown into absolute chaos by the Crimson King's works, the choirs rushing to replace those who had been driven mad or simply killed outright by the psychic maelstrom unleashed upon the assault of the homeworld's etheric defenses.
You know, even if this entire situation did not happen in terms of the astropathic communications in disarray, it would still take a long time for a force or like a flotilla mission to take form and then go over to Prospero. Because what I've realized with the Imperium of Man is that there's a lot of political meanderings and handshakings and scratching of backs of important officials to garner favors or to get requisition for resources or for manpower or for special forces within the Imperium of Man. So yes, it does take some time for a commanding officer of an operation to get like titans from the Mechanicus of Mars, or in this case the Mechanicum of Mars, or to get Officio Assassinorum members, or to get Astra Militarum regiments, or to get space-worthy vessels from the Imperial fleet to also join them, or to get Astartes to join them. It takes a long time to organize everything, to get everything prepared, and then once that armada has been completed, then the Imperium of Man can engage in an offensive warfare or defensive, or just use it as a patrolling fleet that's supposed to protect the borders of the Imperium of Man. That's what I've realized with the Imperium of Man, is that they take time to organize everything before they head out to their objective.
It was not for several solar weeks that word of what happened, and word of what would now happen in response, would reach the two off-world points that mattered most. The Vengeful Spirit, flagship of the War Master Horus Lupercal, and Fenris, icebound fief of the 6th Legion Astartes, the Vilca Fenrica, commonly, if always informally, known as the Space Wolves. Unsurprisingly, the records of just what transpired in this time period are fragmentary, both due to the infrastructural devastation wreaked upon Terra, the whims of warp chronodilation, and of course the loss of archival records during the Great Heresy. But it appears that, at least initially, the muster was spearheaded by the Captain General of the Legio Custodes, Constantin Valdor. The Emperor, absent from public and military life for years at this point, did not emerge from the palace at any time during or following the chaos. Authority from within the imperial household flowed from the font of Valdor, first of the 10,000, and Malcador the Sigillite, from his position as head of the Council of Terra, both now furiously occupied in bringing stability back to the tumultuous throne world. To the Captain General was delegated the responsibility of mustering the force of arms to be known as the Censure Host, although it was always understood that eventual command would be granted to Leman Russ, Primarch of the 6th Legion, as under the Imperial Junta government the Primarchs shared equal authority, second only to the Emperor. In terms both judicial and practical, Valdor was likely perfectly fine with this arrangement. Had his personal feelings upon the matter, or indeed any matter, ever been a consideration to his comportment of his duties, anyone who states thus clearly does not know the Custodes.
Yeah, they're not about that type of, life where they think about their own desires or emotions. Then they're nothing like that. These are the perfect super soldiers. This, like I've stated before, this is what I wish the Primarchs were more like, where their emotions are not governing their actions, where they are completely 100% loyal to the Emperor. The Astartes are flip-floppers. The Primarchs are flip-floppers, just like their father, the Emperor, flip-flopper. He's not consistent. But the most consistent group of people who I know in the Imperium of Man has to be the custodians. They are consistent, and it's one of the reasons why they're my favorite faction within the Imperium of Man. You can never go wrong with them. You can never worry to watch your back when it comes to a custodian. When they say they've got your back, they've got your back. They are the Emperor's best and most reliable tool in his toolbox. Not the Astartes, not the Primarchs. It's them, the men in gold. I like them.
The Captain General was a leader and a warrior considered second only to the Primarchs. Indeed, many have long speculated that in terms of sheer combat prowess, he would have been the equal or better of many of them, although one finds such petty power dynamic bickering trivial and ultimately pointless. It was Valdor's stated and consistent position to remain as perfectly neutral from all aspects of imperial politics, be they martial or temporal, as he, and by extension the Legio Custodes, could possibly be. Intervention was only ever undertaken under the explicit direction of the Emperor himself, or when Valdor's own judgment concluded that either these orders or the Emperor's personage was at risk. Valdor's appointment to this position within the censure host was both the natural result of his position at the highest military authority on the throne world, and as well a considered choice, as the importance of the host's mission could under no circumstances fall prey to the Imperium's oft divisive politics. The Council of Nicaea was still fresh upon the minds of many, even years later, and many of these would damn Magnus a traitor for the actions he had taken, disrupting the stated mission of the host, which was to bring Magnus before his father, the Emperor, in person. Additionally, the legendary composure of Valdor was likely considered vital in reining in the more bellicose character of Leman Russ.
Constantine Valdor reigning in Leman Russ, a Primarch. I highly doubt that's even possible. Especially when it comes to Leman Russ, who doesn't listen to anyone else but his own, thoughts and processing of his own emotions. There's no way. No matter how close Constantine Valdor is to Leman Russ does what Leman Russ wants to do. No one's going to tell him to stop. No one's going to tell him to think of it differently. He's just going to act on his own impulses. Nice try, though, by bringing in Constantine Valdor, hoping that he might rein in Leman Russ. Good luck with that.
Known as one of the most willful Primarchs amongst the Brotherhood. Finally, as the bearer of the Magisteria Maxima, the Emperor's own judicial seal, Valdor had supreme legal authority under the Lex Imperialis, possessing the full legitimacy of the military regime's government. In the immediate term, the Captain General had no difficulty in securing the core of the censure host from the local volume. Although it had been 200 years since unification and the Solar Reclamation, the Sol system, and Terra specifically, was the greatest fortress humanity had ever possessed, and was manned accordingly. Diverse armed forces from both humanity's core worlds and its recently conquered regions were present, in both ceremonial and specifically defensive roles. These included Astartes from all legions, the so-called Crusader host, as well as the Solar Auxilia, the Exertus Imperialis, soldiers in their millions, as well as thousands of Mechanicum Tagmata, both Martian and otherwise, and hundreds of god engines of the Collegia Titanica. Valdor's choices from these formed a cocktail of the powerful, the exotic, the arcane, and the influential. After all, the host's primary purpose was as escort for Magnus the Red, however imprisoned the Crimson King was to be during the voyage. Such an event was both punishment for the Primarch's crimes and a message to the Imperium, a demonstration of the fate that would be suffered if any others chose to defy the Emperor's writ, no matter their station. Fittingly, the forefront would represent the Emperor's Auric judgment, a vanguard of the Legio Custodes itself. 982 warriors of the 10,000, representing 91 individual sodalities of the Legio. Supplementing them in unaugmented manpower were the regiments of the Exertus, with the bulk being 5,000 troopers from the 3rd Tyrannic, the Ironside regiments of Old Albia.
I'm sorry, but I'm reading here the Silent Sisterhood estimated 3,000. 3,000 of these ladies, of the Sisters Militant, constituting 3 full Vigilists of the Silent Sisterhood. 3,000, that's a lot. That is a lot. I didn't even know there were that many. Hey, amazing.
Alongside them were 4,000 hoplites from the 9th Solar Auxiliary Cohort, one of the renowned Saturnine Rams regiments that had founded this wing of the Imperial Auxilia during the Solar Reclamation.
Hold up, I'm reading out another name here. I can't pronounce it. Dominus Zaltax? Okay, yes, Thane Esmark, commanding precepts of the Chamber of Occidentals of the Ordo Sinister. The Ordo Sinister, the Psi Titans. Oh, wow. This is going to be one powerful force. One powerful force. The Sisters of Silence and the Psi Titans. And they would be the perfect weapons against the 15th Legion with their Psyker abilities. Because the nullifying effects of the Sisters of Silence would be extremely effective. And the Psi Titans of the Ordo Sinister are also extremely effective against psychic based weaponry and like warriors, essentially. And then you have the custodians, and then of course the regular auxiliary army combatants, which also add in that extra oomph. So yeah, this is a very effective fighting force right here. And you also have to add in the 6th Legion, the wolves, the space wolves. Wow. Are we really here to arrest him? Are we really here to arrest Magnus the Red? Or are we here to go to war?
The 10th and 42nd Sacrosang Voltiguers provided 3,000 light and reconnaissance infantry for service, while 8 Tyrian Exoguard regiments offered up 600 void-armoured heavy infantry and 100 or so of their helots. Finally, the Carinid Sentinels were levied of 2,000 of their men-at-arms, all of which were amongst the most augmented baseline human troops within Saul's Light, bearing weaponry and equipment allowed to no other Exertus regiment, as befitted their stations, as wardens of the vast volumes between the planets and stations of humanity's home system. Despite the presence of so many Tagma within the system at the time, it curiously does not appear that the Mechanicum of Mars were contacted to provide these military elements for the host. Indeed, that they were included at all appears to have been a direct result of a late and highly pointed request made to Valdor by the Fabricator General Kelbor Hal himself, subsequent to the time that word of the host's formation had reached War Master Horus.
I mean, this is a once-in-a-lifetime historic event, where the Emperor is censuring his own son, Magnus the Red, and, he should be brought back to Terra for questioning and, disciplined by the Emperor. So everybody who is anybody wants to be involved in this operation. They want their names to be there to say, I was there. I was the one who contributed to the censure of Magnus the Red. And definitely, here is the Mechanicum of Mars' most powerful representative, saying that we are going to give you support, whether you like it or not. You will have it.
If the Captain General had desired to make the censure a completely imperial affair, keeping Mars, the Fabricator General, and the Synod out of the proverbial loop, it appears he either underestimated their desire to play a role in such a pivotal event, or was outmaneuvered politically, for means either mundane, or in dreadful hindsight, ominous. Consequently, the Sidonian tagmata was attached to the host, formed of tagma drawn from Ekris, Norn, and Ifrem, as well as Mars herself, with the stated purpose of the inspection, assessment, and, if necessary, impounding and disassemblage of any technology found upon Prospero that Mechanicum Dogma prohibited. These were the most visible elements of the censure host.
Hold on, guys, hold on. The Chamber of Occidentals of the Ordo Sinister, 5 Psi Titans of the Ordo Sinister, all Warlord Psi Titan machines. 5. You only need 1 to conquer a civilization. 2 is overkill, but 5 of them. That's a nightmare. This is just too powerful. This entire censure host is just too powerful already. And then on top of it, we have the 6th Legion. Man.
Valdor, of course, was not content in merely utilizing the mundane forces at his disposal. Indeed, considering the Legion he was tasked with standing before, far more exotic formations were called for. To the Somnus Citadel upon Luna, Terra's sole natural satellite, a missive was dispatched, and it was one that was answered immediately. 3,000 Sisters Militant of the Divisio Telepathica's Investigatis wing, commonly known by those aware of their existence as the Silent Sisterhood, answered Valdor's summons, constituting 3 full vigils and associated Charon pattern Acquisitor grav tanks. Additionally, far to the west of the Imperial Palace upon Terra, a black-clad representative made his presence noted to Valdor and the host's command cadre, notifying the Captain General — it should be noted history is unclear if this figure had been requested or not — that the Chamber Occidentalis of the Ordo Sinister was at full combat readiness. 5 Warlord Sinister-class Psi Titans, the most horrific and terrible weapons ever constructed by the Emperor's own hand, were embarked upon their ebon transport barks and awaiting deployment, along with 100,000 Secutarii Sinister, the Ordo's bespoke Secutarii Titan Guard.
Guys, this is overkill of the highest proportions. 3,000 Sisters of Silence, 5 Psi Titans, 100,000 Securitas of the Psi Titans. And then you have the auxiliary forces. And then you have the custodians. And then you're going to have the 6th Legion Astartes, the Space Wolves. And with a Primarch. For the 15th Legion alone.
Between the Sisterhood and the Ordo, the censure host would boast what was possibly the most potent anti-psyker military force ever assembled in one place by the Imperium. Certainly, while the Ordo is known to have engaged in several psycho-arcane purgation engagements throughout the Great Crusade,
but it's never been more than 2 or 1 Titan operational. All 5 of them now. 5. That's crazy.
Records are, of course, significantly redacted. It is unlikely to impossible that 5 of their Psi Titans had ever been deployed simultaneously, or against any one foe, even in operations undertaken against, say, Asuriani craft worlds or Crave infestations. Certainly, this was reflected in the command cadre that formed the core of authority within the host. Constantin Valdor was naturally the apex, but at his right hand stood Janisha Kroll, the vigil commander of the Sisters of Silence herself. Below them, authority for the unaugmented troops lay with High Marshal Marcus Roan of the 3rd Tyrannic Auxilia, while at his side, outside the chain of command, Dominus Zelatkus, Thrain Esmark, prefect of the Chamber Occidentalis, commanded the Psi Titans. The Mechanicum, as you may see, had no say in command authority, Their tagmata was expected to defer to Valdor, Kroll, and Esmark, depending on situational demands. The Custodes and the Exertus were the public face of the censure host. Such a rapid collection of military might in the near space of Terra could not escape the notice of many, no matter the supreme authority of those that were directing it. The Emperor's writ of censure had been made explicitly public. All present upon the throne world, with half a lick of sense, knew that the Custodes were forming an expedition to capture the Cyclops of Prospero. Few, of course, knew the identity of the beaconless, black-hulled craft that lurked within the flotilla, for few, if any, knew of the existence of the Silent Sisterhood beyond rumor, and fewer still, the existence of the Ordo Sinister. Neither of these formations were for the eyes of the masses. Let the Custodes march along parade grounds, as the Emperor's justice manifests. Within the hulls of these ships lay his ultimate weapons against the Aetheric. Their presence there, and our ability to confirm this in history, a testament to the totality of intent behind the order to bring Magnus to task by any means necessary. Clearly, there was hope that the Crimson King would simply surrender himself to his father's judgment. Just as clearly, the unthinkable other outcome, that he may resist, and by force.
I mean, they are over-prepared. They are over-prepared. Clearly. Just in case if he does retaliate, their over-preparedness is just amazing. It's terrifying.
It was clearly being considered, and without any mercy. Was a display of power a demand for contrition? Even the use of dread ever the truly stated aim? More on that to come. Regardless of the urgency of the task and the superlative abilities of those commanding it, it would nevertheless take several months to properly assemble and arm the censure host within Terran space. This was as much to do with the simple processes of logistical demands any such assemblage would require, as it was to do with the sheer chaos Magnus's actions had wreaked upon the administrative infrastructure of the Sol system. Additionally, the import of the action was lost upon none, with the senior staff of all wings of the host sequestering themselves in the most secretive chambers of the Divisio Militaris headquarters, to study in detail the intelligence that existed about the Prosperine system, its locales, and its potential defenses. Valdor personally demanded the presence of Atharva, the single Astartes representative of the Thousand Suns, present within Sol's light at the time of Magnus's folly.
It must be really awkward for you to be in that position as the 15th Legion Astartes, on Terra and hearing about the censure of your Primarch and the 15th Legion. And the fact that there's a flotilla being built up for this particular mission to arrest Magnus the Red. It must be very strange.
Through debriefings likely intense, Atharva was interrogated about his homeworld, his legion, and his Primarch, willingly surrendering what information he could to the host.
Hopefully they don't kill him.
It appears that at this point the idea that Magnus would somehow resist was not actively in consideration, at least not in the minds of Valdor and Malcador. Both believed the Sisterhood and the Ordo Sinister to be weapons of absolute last resort. One such as Valdor would never be given over to emotional considerations, being a man of deep, faultless practicality. The possibility that Magnus would be in open rebellion before him was scant. Not a total impossibility, however, so he would be equipped accordingly. That being said, there were within the host those who, on no uncertain terms, were eager to believe the worst of Magnus and his legion. So, whatever the feelings of the Captain General, they were preparing for the worst, or even perhaps relishing the possibility. Strictly speaking, this forward military planning, the assessment of defenses, this was a contingency, nothing more, a necessity in the event of a worst-case scenario. Strictly speaking, that is. Under these assumptions, did the censor host slip anchor over Terra, bound outwards from the solar reaches for the onward muster at Beta Garman. There, it was hoped, the host would rendezvous with the forces of the 6th Legion and the Primarch Leman Russ. The astropathic choirs, messages of grave import long since delivered, now turned their attentions to making the writ of censure known as far and wide across the galaxy as possible. As the censure host left the system, the mimetic dream code of deepest gravity leapt from the minds of Terra's astropaths across all Memno communication hubs. The Emperor was broadcasting his word. This was the fate of those who had breached his trust, and there would be none spared from the might of his Lex. At the time of the declaration of censure, the 6th Legion, the Vilca Fenrica, were believed to have been engaged in at least 6 major crusade campaigns, with Leman Russ, as was his wont, at the forefront of the most deadly of these, engaged in the xenocide of the Scarek in the volume of Cipramundi. Due to the particular idiosyncrasies of the 6th Legion, the wolves that stalked the stars kept few to little written reception of the news comes from the sagas as related by their rune priests, as well as Divisio Militaris, logistical and transit logs. The former tells tales of the Wolf King's towering rage at the perfidy of his brother, cursing him to any who would bear to stand against the Fury as a sorcerer in thrall to darkest maleficarum. The latter shows that Russ quit the field of battle at Cipramundi and made for the Legion's homeworld of Fenris with a haste that was almost unseemly, speaking to his zeal that he possessed for the task he had been assigned, or perhaps fury at the actions of his brother. Certainly,
it could definitely be both. He's excited that he's finally going to have this opportunity to destroy his brother, and he's angry to the fact that his brother betrayed the Emperor by going against the Edict of Nicaea. It can be both. But the thing is that Leman Russ is busy with a xenocide here. Why didn't the Emperor choose a Primarch that is not busy currently, whose legion is even closer to Prospero, so that they can easily do this as fast as possible without interfering with the workings of his other Primarchs like Leman Russ, who's out here busy with his legion commencing a xenocide on an alien race. The thought process of the Emperor is always confusing. This decision here is one of the most confusing.
The announced departure of Russ and the Wolves from the Scarek Purgation drew outraged protestations from the commanders of the Imperial Army, as it threw the entirety of the campaign planning into disarray. Not content to leave a battle mid-fight, Russ instead opted to disregard the previous Imperial strategy of methodical but consistent extermination, instead massing the entirety of his Astartes forces into a single strike upon the Xenos core world, ignoring outlying systems. The victory was, of course, won, and in short order, but at no small cost. While the world Warren had been reduced to a phosphex-choked ash wasteland, several thousand space wolves had died in the process, and although the source of the Scarek infestation had been removed from play, there yet lay many more worlds under the thrall of these Xenos. Nevertheless, judging his contribution and honor satisfied, Russ and his fleet made full wake out system, leaving the Imperial Army to finish the work that remained. It is known that these regiments fared very poorly without Astartes support, spending many more years than had been initially planned finishing this xenocide, at the cost of several 100,000 soldiers. Russ brought with him a complement of wolves that had, prior to the assault upon the Scarek core world, numbered some 20,000 Astartes, the entirety of On and Sep, the 1st and 7th of the Legion's great companies. The former consisted of the Wolf King's Huskar retinue, as well as the Legion's foremost companies and the vast majority of its Terminator Astartes. The latter, known within the Legion as the Black Cull, formed the bulk of the Vilka's Destroyer Corps, as well as those afflicted with rage-inducing geno-deficiencies that marked them out for inclusion in the Legion's Death-Sworn divisions. As the pack traveled to Fenris, Russ made all possible attempts to contact the remainder of his Legion, redoubling his efforts once enshrined within the cold halls of the Fang, the holdfast upon the ice world itself.
You know, I'm wondering about that wolf pelt that's on top of Horus Lupercal's Terminator armor. Did he get that wolf pelt from Fenris, or are there wolves on his homeworld as well that are just as big and they can cover up his Terminator armor? I'm just wondering, because Fenris has like these big wolves or dogs that the Legion also uses in war. So I'm just wondering whether that's where he got that pelt from. Yeah, in the comment section, you guys can tell me, where does he get that pelt? Because that's like the main iconic thing about Horus Lupercal. You know, that pelt on top of his armor.
Again, we must trust to the sagas and interpret what Divisio Militaris records remain, but it does not appear that Russ spent any more time on Fenris than a month Terran standard, allowing only such time as was absolutely needed for On and Sep to repair critical arms and armaments, and to count their dead. There would be no time for the depleted 1st and 7th Companies to reinforce themselves, nor indeed would there be any time for those wolves furthest from the Legion to make it to their homeworld, or to Beta Garman, in the time that Russ demanded they do. This issue of replenishment of the ranks was in fact a substantial one for the Legion as a whole during this period. The wolves habitually engaged with foes, and in a manner that, to be blunt, courted a higher body count than was strictly speaking necessary. All of their campaigns were entered into under the assumption, and indeed perhaps resignation, or desire, that they would be bloody and painful. Despite their legendary self-reliance, second only perhaps to the 5th Legion White Scars, many of the wolves' great companies that answered the summons of their Jarl of Jarls were in dire need of replenishment. Those included 4, Trois, and Tolv, the 4th, 8th, and 12th Great Companies. Russ would and could not spare them the time required to bring them to standard, even 6th Legion standard, and the sagas claim that his blood was up to almost Berserker levels. The Cyclops awaited him on that far-off world, and he would not be denied. Russ
Wow, like he's prepared to rush this entire process of organizing his Legion. Even if the Legion is bloodied and wounded and limping, he's going to say, we're forcing ourselves to Prospero, one way or another. Yeah, this guy.
Departed Fenris as soon as he was able, at the head of 50,000 Astartes, and, by the quirks of the warp, arrived at Beta Garman ahead of Constantin Valdor. Thanks to both the 6th Legion's Saga of Prospero, remembrances of senior Exertus officers amongst the Terran contingent, and the superlative work conducted by the chronicler Julius Heraclastes Bensuldam in His Eye Diminished, The Burning of Prospero, The Demise of the 15th Legion, and The Breaking of the Cyclops, with further observations upon the calamity of the sorcerers, we have a surprisingly accurate record of the force that Valdor found waiting once the Terran wing of the Censure host broke from the warp. The Space Wolves, naturally, made up the bulk of the contingent, and indeed comprised the vast majority of the Legion that was contemporarily available in active service, some 73,000 Astartes. On, the first great company, the Breakers of Rings, were 3,000 strong, most of these being senior commanders, as well as the Legion's Varagir Terminator elite. Trois, the second great company, the Thread Cutters, were only 800 in number, being primarily engaged elsewhere, but a large number of these were veteran infantry, as well as dreadnought sarcophagi. Tra, the third company, the Eagle's Keepers, were almost entirely recently initiated Astartes.
Tra? Okay.
Assigned to close infantry assault duties, and were one of the largest, at 9,800 Astartes. 4. The 4th Great Company, the Bloodworm's Masters, were heavy infantry and self-propelled artillery, 8,600 strong. 5. The 5th Great Company, the Blood Ice Storm, had been present on Fenris for inductee training and replenishment, and thus comprised of a combined arms force of 10,000 Astartes. Sep, the 7th, the Black Cull, as noted earlier, had been with Russ at Cipramundi, now boasting 5,200 Astartes, almost all destroyers or death-sworn. 4 Trois, the 8th Great Company, the Slaughterfire Heralds, were 9,500 strong, dedicated primarily to reconnaissance and forward infiltration. Tra, the 9th Great Company, the Serpents of the Battle Moon, were infantry support, special weapons teams, and rapier heavy battery platforms.
Isn't Tra 3? So Tra is 6, right? But okay. I'm just guessing here, guys. I'm just talking nonsense. Don't worry.
At 7,800 Astartes. Elev, the 11th Great Company, the Sea Bearer's Flame, were another combined arms force, but notable for having a substantial number of Terrans within their ranks, some 9,200 Marines in total. 12, the 12th Great Company, the Shield Gnawers, supplemented the 3rd with close infantry support formations, but bolstered by heavy armor divisions, and consisted of 8,700 Astartes in total. Finally, Dek Tra, the 13th Great Company, the Corpse Renders, were 600 strong, the smallest of the company elements committed, and consisted of light assault and pursuit infantry squads. Sesk, the 6th, and Dek, the 10th, were absent in their entirety from the muster, unable to either disengage from their campaigns or make it to Beta Garman in time. With the wolves massing and waiting the arrival of Valdor, the censure host was joined by a surprising but not exactly unexpected contingent. 5,000 Astartes in the sea green of the newly renamed 16th Legion, the Sons of Horus. The War Master had not elected to sit idle as the censure host committed to its duty, and had committed a full battalion of his legion, conspicuously arrayed as a line-of-battle unit, and not as a ceremonial detachment.
Of course he wants to participate in the censure of Magnus the Red. There's always an ulterior motive now with Horus Lupercal, because this happened after his situation at the Serpent Lodge, right? Yeah, so definitely him being here with his forces, with his Astartes here, joining with the censure host, it's all a part of his plan. I'm just wondering, how did he convince the Primarch of the 6th Legion? I forgot his name now. Oh my gosh. Leman Russ, yes, sorry. I wonder, how did he convince Leman Russ to change the orders from the Emperor from capturing Magnus the Red to killing Magnus the Red? How did he do that? How did he convince Leman Russ to kill him instead of capturing Magnus the Red? I know that Leman already hates Magnus and his legion, right? But it's the Emperor's command. The Emperor has the last word on this. It's the Emperor's orders. He wants Magnus the Red captured and brought back to Terra, not to be killed. There was nothing like that stated in the writ.
The Sons of Horus were not alone either, as with Valdor's oncoming contingent were accompanied by Exertus Imperialis troops. 9,000 soldiers of the 19th Chthonian Headhunters, 4,000 of the 3rd Idranian Seekers, and 8,000 soldiers from the 73rd and 75th echelons of the Host of Brass. Notably, all 3 of these divisions had either combat history against, notable hatred of, or specialized equipment for the Psyker. Not only men, Horus also bade the Legio Mortis, his most favored Titan legion, to provide 12 god engines for the host.
More titans? Man, guys, are we sure we're here to arrest Magnus? I mean, this is just too much now. This is too much.
2 full maniples and 1 demi-maniple, headed by the warlord class Aeterna Virtus under the command of Princeps Maldus Drain. The head of the War Master's detachment was Overseer Boros Kern, commander of the 16th Independent Assault Battalion. His rank was a relatively newly created one, following the 16th Legion's Davin incident. Kern was purportedly an intense and driven figure who requested, as emissary of the supreme military authority outside the imperial household, to meet with the Wolf King at the earliest opportunity. He had, so he claimed, special instructions from the War Master himself, based upon the latest information Horus had in his possession. What Kern bore precisely, what Russ was told, what Horus said, none of this has ever been revealed to any scholar. It is likely that the only persons who ever knew just what was in that communique are Russ and Horus, and perhaps those they held closest counsel with.
This is not enough. This is not enough. Leman Russ, who are you loyal to? Are you loyal to the War Master, or are you loyal to the Emperor? Are you loyal to your bloodthirstiness, or are you loyal to the Emperor? Who are you loyal to? Who did you swear your oath to? The Emperor is clear. He wants Magnus arrested. And yet, here you are, you're going to be taking the words of the War Master. Where the War Master is now going to suggest to you that you must actually kill Magnus the Red. Where do you get that from? Because the Emperor was clearly stating that it is an arrest.
But it goes without saying that we mortals will never be parley to it. All that is known, for Russ was vocal about the new resolve that lay within his heart, is that this was no longer a mission of capture. This was a death sentence. He intended to execute Magnus the Red. Much has been made over the millennia of this turn of judgment at so late a date. It had been months since the declaration of the writ of censure by the Emperor, even adjusting for warp dilation. Russ was widely known as the Emperor's executioner, a dog held at his side until the moment the leash was slipped and the jaws were sank into the throat of those his master bade him murder make. The loyalty of Russ was as famous as his bloodthirsty reputation. He was no insane butcher like his brother Angron. His was a fury fully contained until the moment he chose to release it. Many chroniclers have thus tended to paint Russ as a victim of circumstance, corrupted to the purpose of the War Master against his will, tricked by the perfidious Lupercal and his cloying words.
Really? Really?
Loic Gerentius, in his seminal Lamentations upon the Age of Darkness, falls prey to this, a notable flaw within his work being a tendency that many others have shared, to lionize those primarchs that stayed steadfast to the throne, while damning the insidious wretches that betrayed it. If one is to remain true to scholarly rigors, we must discount this and admit to ourselves the extant possibility. Russ wanted Magnus dead. Horus merely provided an excuse.
Exactly. Exactly.
It is historical fact that there was no love lost between kings, both Wolf and Crimson. There was outright hostility. Aside from being as unalike in character as any of the siblings had been, Russ firmly believed his learned brother's meddling in warpcraft was a dire and fundamental threat to the Imperium, believing none but their father capable of such study. As an example, the tension is best explored in the events surrounding the Battle of Heliosa, where both legions had been tasked with the conquest of a unity-resistant world of ancient human provenance. In typical Thousand Sons doctrine, Magnus had prioritized the capture and codification of the planet's records, considering the millennia-old culture worth saving in whatever aspects remained. Russ, by contrast, was committing what the Cyclops called senseless genocide. What resulted was a standoff between both Primarchs and their Legion echelons at the city's central library, culminating in Russ and his wolves charging the 15th Legion, only to be disabled by the Sons' psychic powers. This, however, resulted in one of the 15th, a warrior named Hastar, succumbing to the flesh change for the first time since the Legion had been cured of it by their Primarch.
They were never cured of the flesh change. The flesh change was simply suppressed by Tzeentch, the Chaos God. He suppressed it. He didn't cure the flesh change. And I think with enough energy being produced by an Astartes from the 15th Legion, that suppression can be lifted and the flesh change will consume that Astartes. So if you have enough power, if you have enough strength, mental focus to overcome this suppression of the flesh change, it will consume you. I think that's what happened here. Because Tzeentch didn't cure the flesh change. He just didn't. It was all a trick.
Thrown into panic at the re-emergence of a curse they had long thought lost, the 15th were helpless to prevent Russ from executing Hastar on the spot. Magnus and the Wolf King almost came to blows until the intervention of their brother Lorgar, who was assisting in the operation. This is only one example. The most recent and damning was Russ's own testimony at the Council of Nicaea, where, flanked by his own rune priest psychers, he had been the most vocal and passionate of Magnus's critics. The Wolves were, and are to this day, Astartes of contradictions. Russ, no exception. He damned his brother a sorcerer while accompanied by his legion's own openly practicing psychers, all of whom continued their shamanistic Fenrisian rites after the passing of the Nicaean Edict, in open violation of both it and the imperial truth both. Russ was ever willing to clad himself in...
And yet the Emperor has not called for the censure of the 6th Legion. Yes, they may not have done what Magnus the Red and his legion did, by destroying the Webway project, but they are also in contempt of the Edict of Nicaea. By having rune priests, by having them practice their arts, their warcraft arts, out in public. And other legions also, they don't notify the Emperor. They don't raise the concern that, hey, the 6th Legion is still using Astartes with warp abilities. The hypocrisy all over, no matter what legion, no matter what Primarch. It's just that, they have their favorites. The Primarchs have their favorites. The Astartes have their favorites. If you're not part of that favorite list of theirs, of friends or kin, then you are an enemy. And everybody hated the 15th Legion. Everybody didn't like the Primarch Magnus the Red. Not everybody, but majority. A lot of these Astartes, a lot of these Primarchs didn't like him because of his attitude or because of his abilities as a psyker. And that also transferred to the Legion, where a lot of other Legion Astartes didn't like the 15th Legion because of how the Emperor favored them, how the Emperor called them the Thousand Sons. This is all just one big popularity contest. And the 6th Legion has won that contest. And that is why they're able to do as they please. And everybody acts oblivious to it. They have psychers. They are practicing their abilities. It is against the Edict of Nicaea. And they are not being sanctioned by the Emperor.
The rough appearance of a barbarian king, but it has been noted by chronicles both contemporary and subsequent that this was a carefully constructed facade, that of the drunken oafish lout, to disguise the calculating viciousness that lay beneath. The Wolf King would of course never deny this. He had no need to. The views of others mattered not one iota to him, and his legion followed his example. Neither courted kinship with any of their cousins, nor Russ with his siblings. Those who could stand or enjoy their company did so. Those who did not, they paid no heed. Loyalty to the Emperor was the only thing that mattered to him and to the wolves. The Sixth Legion did not build, nor inspire, nor uplift. They existed to destroy, built for that purpose alone. In many ways, it was a role they shared with the First Legion Dark Angels and their detached, mysterious Primarch, the Lion, that of a weapon, and one unconcerned with being anything other than that. This all being said, the wolves clearly relished their role far more than the angels did, savoring the fearful glances and tense exchanges with those of the Imperium that they made uncomfortable. It is uncertain where content detachment ends and egotistical image projection begins with them, and their Primarch. We know so little of both, due to their own partialities and the passages of time, to do anything but infer. This all must be considered in precisely why the Wolves and Russ were selected for the role of primary Astartes cohort within the Censor host. It is not as if other legions were not available at the time. The 7th Legion Imperial Fists and their Primarch Rogel Dorn were serving on Terra as Praetorians to the Throne World in their near entirety, and outnumbered the Wolves in sheer numerical disposition to boot. The 4th Legion Iron Warriors had thousands of Astartes to spare, and a Primarch unconcerned with the arithmetic of spending his warriors' lives as coin to achieve this. The 20th Legion, Alpha Legion, could appear as if from nowhere, with precisely the right amount of warriors the task demanded. Even the 1st Legion, Dark Angels, could serve as the ultimate weapon of the Emperor's writ with ease. It was, essentially, the entire purpose of their existence. Without a full picture of the entirety of all Astartes deployments across the entirety of the Great Crusade, we must fall to one conclusion. The Emperor wanted Leman Russ, Magnus's most furious critic, to lead this. It is historical fact that numerous assignments the Wolves undertook during their existence have been utterly redacted from record, and it was an open secret in the Divisio Militaris and amongst the Primarchs that the title of Emperor's Executioner was one Russ had earned well, being his father's favored instrument of annihilation, especially to traitors to the Imperium. Was his selection merely just a prudent one? To include, on so dangerous a mission, a Primarch that would not balk at taking the life of another, should it fall to that? To one's mind, no. There were others who could have done so, and without blinking. The Lion, for one, Alpharius Omegon, for another. Perhaps even Horus himself, although we need not explore that one further. Russ was not the only candidate for this mission, but he was the most eager. Perhaps this was tacit approval. Not said, for it could never be said, but approval by proxy. An acknowledgement that the Emperor did not believe Magnus would surrender, and that his life must be ended by any means necessary. A means by which the Emperor could maintain the appearance of justice and benevolence, while in his mind being resolved to the most brutal and bloody outcome of the situation. It is, if I may say, not exactly out of character for him to do so, and even less out of character for a regime such as his. That is, of course, all I can say upon the matter.
Yeah, if you say any more, you might be assassinated.
We have the exacting strictures of the Magi of the Beta Garmin Forges to thank for more evidence of the Wolf King's change of heart. Per their meticulous record-keeping, we know that the War Master had ordered the forges to open their arsenals to the wolves, ordering their access to even the most dangerous and otherwise prohibited weaponry. While the Wolf King naturally used the opportunity to resupply the great companies that had otherwise not had the chance to replenish their stocks, he and his legion eagerly availed themselves of the forbidden technologies previously denied to them, or to which their access had been strictly limited. According to logs, this included a quantity of phosphex, the corrosive and unstoppably flammable compound that was nearly impossible to extinguish, that would normally be considered too much even for a system-wide purgation campaign, as well as numerous exterminatus-grade munitions delivered to the Legion's capital ships. Several of these were bioalchemic phage saturation warheads of a lethality that had seen their usage within established Imperial borders completely outlawed, having...
Remember when I was discussing about the two centers of power and how the War Master is, having complete freedom and carte blanche to do as he pleases? There is no oversight over his portfolio as the War Master of the Imperium of Man. Now, Leman Russ has access to weaponry systems that are, still experimental or classified or too powerful for a mission that is tasked on arresting Magnus the Red. They've been given weapons of mass destruction, weapons of exterminatus level. For what? If there was a proper structure of government in the Imperium of Man, the High Lords of Terror would be questioning Horus, Lupercal, and the 6th Legion. Why do you guys have these weapons? When the Emperor clearly stated that you are here to arrest him, not to exterminate the entire planet. Why do you need such powerful weapons?
Been utilized only for the most thorough and dire of alien purges, such as the Rangdan Xenocides. The Legion's Deathsworn were recorded to have placed exorbitant demands for personal ammunition that far outstripped the requirements of even the most dangerous of Crusade operations. By the time the Terran contingent under Constantine Valdor arrived a month after the Wolves, the Custodians found a legion armed to the fangs with war gear suitable for the most horrific of campaigns. Indeed, it was noted that the Legion of Russ appeared to be gearing up for yet another Rangdan Xenocide, rather than an escort for a wayward son of the Emperor. Remembrancers embedded into the Terran wing recorded quite vividly a series of intense and fractious strategic planning meetings held between Russ and Valdor and their senior staffs. Ironically, for two beings of unshakable loyalty to the Emperor, they had arrived at entirely separate conclusions of what his writ of censure bade them do.
I don't know how do you come to two different conclusions when Constantine Valdor comes directly from Terra. He is the right hand or the left hand of the Emperor. It doesn't get any closer than that in terms of the message being sent to the censure host. It is clear. It is written in a document. It is signed by the Emperor. It is stamped with the Emperor's seal. What more do you want? How much clearer do you want it to be? But then we're being told that Leman Russ is loyal to the Emperor. He's not loyal. This is not loyalty. This is treachery. You are acting on your own emotions. You're acting on your own ambition, on your desire to kill your brother, to destroy his legion. And your excuse, Leman Russ, is the fact that the War Master gave you some sort of information. Thus, it gives you the authority to kill him, to kill Magnus the Red. The person with the last say in any matter like this is the Emperor of mankind, not the War Master. So I don't understand how is it that you are confused with what the Emperor is expecting. I don't understand.
While Russ was not exactly open in the saying of it, he had clearly decided to that point that Magnus must die, whereas Valdor would not deviate one iota from the orders of the Emperor to bring the Crimson King to Terra alive.
Too bad you're not in command, Constantine Valdor. Too bad it has to be these compromised individuals, these primarchs who have to be running the show. Because the custodian knows, he knows it's clear the Emperor wanted Magnus alive at Terra. That's it. But you're being led by this compromised individual who happens to be the son of the Emperor. Yes.
Senior command staff were routinely dismissed from these meetings for the two to talk alone. Both were warriors known to have a deep respect for each other's abilities and characters, but it was obvious to any that what relationship they had previously had was fracturing under the differing goals of their combined mission. While Valdor, bearer of the Imperial Magisterium Ultima, was nominally the most senior legal official of the expedition, Russ, as son of the Emperor himself, and operating under hidden orders from the War Master, was, for all intents and purposes, the Emperor's proxy in the censure host, forcing the Captain General to accede to his authority. Valdor's role and loyalty forced him into this position. If there had ever been personal feelings about this, he would have never let them be known. We of course know little of the content of these meetings beyond their historical outcomes. Russ, additionally, ordered the dismissal of all civilian remembrancers from the censure host prior to their departure from Beta Garmin. Never a Primarch that had supported the initiative in the first place, the Wolf King would not even consider their inclusion, deeming whatever he intended to occur upon Prospero was not for the eyes of any but the highest of the Imperium, and definitely not fit for public historical record.
He doesn't want to be remembered as a kinslayer. That's why nobody knows about the other two legions that were expunged. He doesn't want to be remembered as a kinslayer.
What we know of what followed is only the result of a careful preservation of material that was redacted at the highest level, and yours truly has had viewership of, only thanks to the writ of authorities yet higher.
Oh, Oculus! Show off, why don't you? Thank you.
The revisions Russ demanded to the overall plan of action, held secret from all but the senior staff, took very little time. The Wolf King was deeply eager to be underway. Terra had rendered for the host's service its finest navigators, allowing the fleet to utilize warp corridors not typically plied by military starships. This was both to prevent the fleet from being waylaid by any unforeseen warp experiences, but given the prevailing immaterial currents at the time, the route selected was considered far faster than approaching Prospero by any conventional means. Crucially, too, it would also outmaneuver worlds known to have 15th Legion elements stationed upon them. The censor host was not intended necessarily to be a surprise. For the Thousand Suns, the writ of censure having been broadcast throughout the entirety of the Imperium. That Russ sought to disguise its approach, it speaks to the degree with which he was now treating the Cyclops as an enemy, not a brother, denying him the ability to muster or even prepare in advance. Thus, the doom of Magnus made full wake, barreling towards the unsuspecting Thousand Suns with the fury of a wolf pack unleashed. Its coming was the result of many moving parts, both personal and situational. A tragedy of unspeakable sorrow that would soon break upon the shores of the Imperium and of history.
Alright guys, yeah, that is part one of the complete history of the burning of Prospero, Warhammer 40k, and Horus Heresy lore made on the Oculus Imperia YouTube channel. Yeah, like I said before, this is part one of, I think, maybe 4 parts, because it's like a 4-hour video that I'm cutting up into parts. So yes, this is part one of my reaction. And yeah, you know, where it all began with Magnus the Red and his decision to try and intervene in preventing his brother from joining Chaos by using his psychic abilities with his 15th Legion, which was against the Edict of Nicaea and then, of course, transporting himself all the way to Terra, tearing down the defensive systems and security systems that the Emperor created to protect Terra from any external forces or immaterium forces from the warp. How he just destroyed everything just to go to his father and tell him about Horus Lupercal. Really, it was the greatest and biggest mistake he had ever done with his legion, and that resulted in the censure of the 15th Legion and of Magnus himself, and how everything was getting organized by the Captain General of the Custodians, along with all the other commanding officers of the Central Host, how they were organizing, the personnel that were going to be going on this mission, in terms of the different various departments of the Imperium of Man's war machine, if I can say that. You have the Mechanicum, you have the regular Astra Militarum forces, you have the Sisters of Silence who are coming in, you have the Psi Titans who are coming in, you have the Custodians who are coming in, and then on the side of Leman Russ and the 6th Legion, you have not the entire 6th Legion, the entire 6th Legion of the Space Wolves, but you have a lot of them, like around 50,000 of them, who are coming for this mission. However, everybody has ulterior motives. The commanding officers of the Central Host have ulterior motives. The only person who is loyal and clear on what the Emperor is expecting is the Custodians, especially the Captain General, Constantine Valdo. Everybody else have their own interests and their own vendetta against the 15th Legion, as well as Magnus the Red, or have this prejudiced hate towards Psychers. And the 15th Legion and Magnus the Red are the biggest beacon of Psyker hatred, if I can say that. So really, it's slowly becoming a mess, this entire operation, because now also the involvement of Horus and his power as the War Master, empowering Leman Russ to do as he pleases in terms of not capturing Magnus the Red, but by killing him. The desired goal of Leman Russ, to kill his brother and destroy his legion, is now being sanctioned by the War Master. And that brings into question of Leman Russ's loyalty. Where does it truly lie? Because clearly it's not the Emperor. It's not the Emperor's word. It's not the Emperor's command. It's his own desires. It's his brother's commands that he's taking, and not the Emperor. And also, when I was discussing about the oversight abilities of the High Lords of Terror, should have been further entrenched to make sure that things like this don't happen, where the War Master is able to accumulate so much power, direct resources, experimental weapons over to the 6th Legion for them to use on Prospero and its citizens, who are Imperial citizens, I might quite add. They're not xeno races. They're not a xeno species. They are not betrayers to the Imperium of Man. They are a compliant world within the Imperium of Man borders. And yet, Horus, the War Master, is able to just do as he pleases, carte blanche, in terms of having access to weaponry systems, to Titans, to Exterminatus-based weapons, and he's able to divert that resource over to the 6th Legion without any oversight from the civilian government, from the High Lords of Terror, where they would ask him, why are you sending him such powerful, devastating weapons for a mission of censure of the 15th Legion and Magnus the Red? No one can ask that question, because it's the son of the Emperor, and he's the War Master of the Imperium of Man. This is the type of statecraft mess that could have been avoided by the Emperor. So there are many factors that are leading up to the catastrophe that happen on Prospero right now, where the emperor is not really a good statesman. He's not really a good emperor. The sons of the emperor are not good listeners. They don't obey the commands of their father. Where regular people, if I can say that, also have their own vested interests in a situation that is of highest priority to the Imperium of Man, where there is no control over how things are organized in terms of military operations, where anyone who is anyone can just impose themselves and bring forth whatever they desire to say that they have contributed to a particular operation. There's no orderly structure of this is the military, this is what should be expected from the military. If the military is requesting resources, anywhere from within the empire, they must comply. But no, that's not really how it works out here. You have to shake hands, you have to have political power, you have to have, favors with very powerful individuals or influential people. And in even those organizations, they can decide for themselves that they're going to impose themselves on your operation. Like the Order Sinister, they're imposing their 5 side titans into this mission. The Mechanicum of Mars, they are imposing their forces onto this mission. So really, the Imperium of Man is a organized mess. And Prospero is going to feel the total brunt of the failure of the state. They're going to feel it. Yeah. Alright guys, that's it for part 1. Part 2 will come next week, I'm hoping. And hopefully I'll see you guys then for that as well. Thank you again to Oculus Imperia for making this video. And really I am enjoying it. I'm enjoying listening to you, listening to the story that's just unfolding before us. And thank you again to Noble Night House Hypertrex for this request. I will continue on until I complete the 4-hour video. Yes. Guys, remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as Oculus Imperia's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And I'll see you guys hopefully next week. Okay? For part 2. Bye-bye.